Hi, this is Suzarka again. I was involved in a discussion in an online forum about making a border wrap using round wire instead of square. And they were wondering how to prevent it from twisting. And I'm going to try to do my best to explain what I do to make sure it works. If you don't know what a border wrap is, a border wrap is like this. You use a number of wires parallel to one another. You wrap them, and then you move them to hold the stone. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, email me, let me know, and I'll see if I can make it more clear. So I'm going to use a round wire. Now a square wire is exactly that. If you look at it on the end, it'll be square. And when you put 2 or 3 of them in parallel, they'll hold next to one another because they're square. If you use round wires in a border wrap, what ends up happening is that the wires like to turn. They're much less manageable, but I like to do it sometimes because it gives a really interesting design element. Now this is copper wire, and I got it off of a spool from a hardware store. So I'm going to straighten it a little bit. I don't want to work it too much because I don't want it to be too hard because it's already fairly thick at 18 gauge. And I have bound my wires for a border wrap with round wire, but because it's so thick, it's even more difficult to manage. So it's a kind of design. I'm going to move this just a hair. It's a design that works in some circumstances. It's much easier to bind your wires with half round. And half round, if you look at it from the end, will be exactly that. It'll be a round piece of wire that's been sliced in half all the way down. Well, that's what it appears to look like. And so, of course, when you wrap it around something, it won't have as much height or depth, and it will be closer to the stone then when you do it like that. It has a nice clean look, and it's much easier to manage. Okay, so when I start wrapping, I start somewhere at the end of a wire, and I take it around once. Now you see this wire's kind of off, but that's okay. It's off into the distance, and I'm going to cut it off later, so that's all right. This is the wrap that I'm interested in. And once I make one round, I take the flat pliers and I give it a very gentle squeeze. That will separate these wires, and it'll flatten this, and it'll tighten it all together. Now, depending on how thick this wire is, how many layers, say I'm doing 10 wires like this. I've done that before. Or, I don't know why else you would, but let's say going down and up and pinching doesn't seem to be giving you enough control. Then what you do is you go half wrap, pinch, half wrap, pinch. But this is working, but you see round wire, it's starting to twist. You see how the whole bundle will be starting to twist away from me. Now I hold it really tight here, and when I pinch, I give it a little tweak back. And after every manipulation of the wire, I make sure the wire is exactly where I want it to be. All of the wires. A lot of people new to wire wrapping confuse wire with fabric, because fabric can be forgiving and you can pull fabric back after you're done with it. They think that it'll behave in the same way, and it doesn't. It behaves like metal. Once you set it in a certain place, that's where it stays. So one of the interesting things I've seen from people saying that they can't get their loops to be even or clean. Now, they're treating it like thread is my best guess. They're taking the end and wrapping it around, and you can't do that. You have to bend it at the spot, tug it, set it in its place, bend it again. You're bending it around corners instead of looping it around something like you would with, let's say, crochet. So you have to pull. Another one of the tricks that I've learned is that if I go to set this wire next to the next wire, sometimes there'll be a space left over, and the design doesn't look very good then. So I put it on top of the other wire just slightly, not directly on top, just a little bit on top, and then use the pliers to force it to go down and lay beside it. That way you're guaranteed that there's no space in between the wraps. And that, I hope, answers the question of how to prevent twisting. And I know for those of you that haven't done this pinch after every wrap before, you're going to think, well, this is just way too much work. But it really, really does make a huge difference in how clean your lines are, and how well everything comes together afterwards, because everything will be so straight and wonderfully perfect. And I'm wondering if you can see that now. See how that is. So this one that's off at an angle, I would just undo the last, snip it off with my snippers, and then tuck that end on, bend this one over, snip, and put that on. And then that becomes the bottom for a cabochon later. I know a lot of people, they use tape. I've never used tape, so I really don't know how. I do this, and then I guesstimate where I want my next bunch of wires to be, and they're going to be right about here and right about here. So then I'll go ahead and do that. I will start wrapping it here, and I'll start wrapping it here. You can mark it with a marker, and do your wraps, and then bend these into place just like it was on the necklace that I showed you and seemed to have lost. See, these were then bent later from here. Here's bent out. And that's it. I hope that was helpful. If I missed anything, please let me know. Thanks.